Well, thanks for being here, folks. How's my volume? Got some thumbs up. Great. So, something that's been on my mind that wanted to bring into a talk. I named this, sometimes start with titles, because it helps me unfold a theme, and the title for this talk is How to Not Let Donald Trump Drain the Light from Our Souls. And so I bet some of you watched the debate, and how was that for you? What did you see about your practice? Did you have one at that time? And if you did, how did it serve? And when did it disappear? Or why? Why did it disappear? So I watched as different parts of me came up. This is somewhat of a sequence, though I think there's some simultaneity. So I was watching this with my partner last night, and so the first thing was shock, and then sickness at the lack of dignity. Then there was shame, and there was indifference, and there was a part of me I call fear and flee the country. And then there was not knowing, and then there was I wrote down unbreakable wholeness, or contact with something, a particular way of knowing, and then renunciate, and then solidarity and potential in the apocalypse. So I want to unfold that, just to share how this was practiced for me, and maybe there'll be some resonance for you. So first, shock. Naturally we have standards, and we have shared cultural standards, and we have personal standards, and we have a general sense, a code of decency that I think for most of us is universal, and that seems to be rapidly shifting. That seems to not be as widely as accepted, at least as much as I thought it was. So my initial hit when I tuned into the debate was shock. That this is the leader of the free world, entrusted with immense influence, and this is someone that millions support and celebrate. I also had shock that there was no structure to hold the discourse from chaos. And so I think one of the things I learned from Jogen Roshi is curiosity about states of mind, about where they come from, why they arise. And so, surprise and shock is one of those states of mind. What is it? What's happening with that state? And where I'm at with it now is it's when what's happening collides with our belief of what should or can happen. Surprise or shock. Maybe shock is a stronger version of what's happening colliding with our general experience of what tends to happen. And then in the Dharma, there's a tension between expecting the world to be based in delusion. That's the basic teaching about samsara. The world is based in delusion. It's kind of a sober acceptance of that human beings and their societies and their institutions are animated by greed, anger, and ignorance. And that's basically the way it is. And so there's a tension between that teaching and this reasonable expectation that people will be decent. A line from Jizza from the Liquid Swords album came to mind. I don't know if any of you remember Jizza. This is a great album. But he said, "I see wisely, as if nothing ever surprised me, lounging between two pillars of ivory, I'm lively." That line about I see wisely as if nothing ever surprises me really struck me as part of the training of Dharma. So in a sense, there's some information for us in shock. At that moment, my mind is not including the whole range of truth, or I wouldn't be shocked, because this is something that human beings do. And at the same time, it's like our humanity is sparked, or our heart is sparked by seeing this general code of decency being ruptured. So then as I continue to watch, and I really inclined towards staying present because I felt the potential or the movement to check out, as I continued to watch and stay present, I began to feel ill. And I heard that from a number of folks that they found bearing witness to this sickening. Our bodies responding. And is it because when we are practitioners, and in Zazen and our other practices, we rest and inhabit Dharma, we come into contact with the potential for dignity that we all have. We come to know in ourselves and in others like how a human being can be, and how we fall short, and we start to see more and more when we fall short. So the sickness can be that we witness that not being fulfilled, and actually the opposite being transmitted to people, and our being vibrates with the wrongness of it. And for some of us, that was some sickness. So I still had access to some spaciousness at that point. And I reminded myself not to collapse into any state or emotion so I could really witness the spectacle. And then when I did that, I noticed the sickness moved through. It arose, it existed, and it passed. And I tend to think of this, my interpretation of this with the practice and emotions is that if their message is cleanly delivered, or if their message is heard, then they tend to move on. But if they can't quite make the delivery, if that's stymied in some way, it tends to recur or kind of swirl in an eddy. So the next thing that happened as I continued to watch was some shame at being an American. And there's a paradox in Zen practice. So on one hand, one of the deep gifts of it is that we free ourselves from identity by holding them lightly. And we come to understand that no identity encompasses the whole of what we are. Not the ones we like and not the ones we wish people wouldn't put upon us. No identity encompasses or really pins down what we are. And one of the essential Buddhist teachings, reflections on experiences, this is not me, this is not myself. In a way, it's via negativa, or it's a neti, as they teach in the Hindu traditions. Whatever arises and disappears is not me, because I am not that which arises and disappears. So no identity really hits the mark. And also, with practice, we open the ability to more fully inhabit the identities we wear in everyday life. It's something like, it's not me, so therefore I can be this fully because I'm not limited to it. I can play this role in this moment. I can sometimes be whatever people think I need to be, or whoever they think I are, because I know it's only a tiny slice. So in bearing witness to Trump, who for so many Americans is an emblem of their state of mind and wishes, or at least resonating with an aspect of their minds and wishes, I experienced an impulse to disavow and to dissociate from this national identity. Basically, I don't want to be in this group, and I don't want to be associated with this group. So the question for me is, how do I reconcile this deepest truth that is unbound by culture, place, and time, and even by the body, and the very local and historical karmic shapes we're living out and impacted in? As much as it's a limited identity that I'm an American, it's still a truth. It's still a truth that if I were to just try to avoid or ignore that, that's spiritual bypassing, which is an important term. In my practice, something that's emerging is a new understanding for me, and that is that inner paradox or tensions don't necessarily need to be reconciled. So embracing rather than resolving paradox, being larger than dualities. So sometimes if I felt an inner conflict, I thought that if I figured out which side of me was right, or which place I should align with, then that is what peace is. Rather, this is just holding what seems like paradox. So what happens when we allow seemingly incongruent or at odds parts of ourselves or experience to just be incongruent or just be at odds? If we do that in the context of awareness, I was using the word host in some of the reminders during meditation. That's a classic thing in Zen teaching, and it has different meanings, but one of them is that which fields experience, that which allows anything to happen in the first place. So what happens if we can context paradox in that which fields and has no identification? So the next thing that arose for me after this feeling of shame and this kind of inner pinballing of, well, I'm not an American. I don't have to, be invested or identified with this. And yes, you are. This indifference arose for me. And this is my personal poison. And sometimes I think this is humanity's deepest poison. It's definitely a national poison that institutionalized and interpersonal racism has remained intact long enough and strong enough for our president to embody the outlooks he does and be celebrated by millions. From my vantage point, it can only be the consequence of deeply ingrained indifference. So in response to the spectacle and the shame, I noticed the way checking my heart out was seeping in. It's something that it's taken me a while to really notice that happens in my being when certain things arise. That it's like it almost kind of sneaks away. I'm not looking, and it goes and hides in the corner. That I disinvest my heart presence in what is unfolding. And the inner dialogue was there's two things I noticed. One is, well, this is just the way the world is. And then the other thought was, well, I'm powerless. I'm powerless. These thoughts accompanied this sneaking away of the heart. Those have a grain of truth. They have a grain of truth, but retracting the heart from the way the world isn't our practice. Another indifference narrative I catch is, I'm glad I will only be around for 3 or 4 more decades. I don't know if anybody has that one, but that rings true to part of me, but it also is pretty selfish, right? Because we know that our children or our friends' children and their children are not going to have that luxury, but they're going to be coming into this world we can or cannot be indifferent to. And anyway, it may not be true that we won't be around. We may very well be around in another form. That we die and we just kind of, an off switch happens is just a belief. So, indifference. In Dharma, we recognize this dynamic that we call samsara. And Lama Michael says, when it's not working, it's working. That there is this profound truth, and this is the way the world is. But we don't disinvest. We don't disinvest because that is also samsara, the disinvesting. It turns on greed, anger, and indifference. Or we do disinvest, but then we see that, which is at least my experience, is I have to keep reinvesting, keep deciding. And I think I'm deciding more and more that I'm going to keep my skin in the game as best I can at this time. So with indifference, there's the energetic withdrawal and re-engagement. There's the re-inhabitation of the body and heart that we do. And I experience it as doing a practice of correction, of coming back into phase. It's almost like the soul drifts apart from the body. There's this fuzzy, disinhabited feeling. And that's vital, because if I withdraw from the heart, then my fuel for response drains away. So I found myself coming back into myself, and my partner mentioned something about really wanting to leave the country. And I was connecting with that mind state. And when I came back into my body, I basically encountered the plain fact of being afraid. Just afraid of the potential for this country and the world to be a place that people are not welcome in, that I'm not welcome in, that people don't want to invest in, that I don't want to invest in. Plain fear that it will be difficult, if not impossible, to bear. Part of my practice is really learning to inhabit fear, like on a somatic level. I think part of many cisgendered men's conditioning in this culture is that it's not okay to be afraid. It's not okay to experience fear, and it's really not okay for other people to see that. It's not okay for our partners to see that, our children to see that, and certainly not other men. And so I feel this is a vital part of our practice. And one of the best things that can happen is, in a safe container of zazen, a manageable upsurge of fear, so that there's the possibility to more deeply inhabit that and have some space around it. For me, I put fearlessness on the shelf until I can fully inhabit fear. That's the training for me, is not being unafraid, but training and being able to fully inhabit the fear. And maybe they're the same thing. I don't know. When people are fearless, does it mean they don't experience it, or does it mean that their relationship to it has shifted? So I think if Donald Trump had this skill to inhabit his fear and to be steady in that inhabitation and to really understand its nature and its source, then we wouldn't be seeing what we're seeing. And imagine everyone with this skill. And part of the beauty of the mindfulness movement and this collective democratization of the tools of the Dharma is that this simple skill is so potent. And in a way, it has life or death impact. The police are afraid. The policed are afraid. Men and women who abuse their parents or spouses or children are afraid. We just can trace fear and the inability to understand and be in relationship with fear to so much that unfolds that we know is off. So out of fear of what the society can become, or the potential for violence and devolution, I had the thought, how can I get out of here? And my ancestors had this thought. My great-grandmother left Europe from persecution, coming to America. And their fear led to me having relative safety and opportunity. So it's not a completely, there's some wisdom in this thought. Is this safe? Is this a place to invest in? Or is there a better way to live my life? But here is where indifference and fear feed on each other, because in my fear, I tune out. In my fear, I tune out and I don't attend to those who can't flee or who don't want to disinvest. So the fear and the indifference kind of work together, and they spawn a false certainty. So I found myself shifting into some quality of not knowing. And the not knowing was partially because I wanted to offer something to my partner who was feeling it really deeply and feeling really distressed. It seems to me a human quandary. There is a human quandary between overestimating our ability to predict how things will unfold and ignoring the trend of how cause and effect is unfolding. We think we know what's going to happen. It's not quite right. And yet we can totally put our heads in the sand and really not see what we are actually seeing. So part of the quandary is binary thinking. In your heart of hearts, is it true for you that Trump being reelected is entirely bad and him losing is entirely good? Is it really that simple? Or is reality more nuanced? There are of course, the negative sells advertising space in newspapers. But there are some interesting statistics that can round out how we're feeling about what's going on. The number of nonprofits and activist organizations that have sprung up and swelled in numbers during this presidential term is huge. And from my read, that far outnumbers the increase in white nationalism. That the people actually being galvanized and clarifying values and getting involved is higher on that side than those who are becoming more magnetized into violence. So from one view, the last 4 years are a humanitarian disaster, and from another, it's exactly what has sparked this movement that has so much potential. And people listening and really being willing to look at the violence of America. There's a famous koan in response to a student asking about practice and how do we do it. Non-Zen, this Zen master said, the way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is delusion. I could say certainty. Certainty is delusion. Not knowing is a blank consciousness. When you have really reached the true way beyond all doubt, you will find it as vast and boundless as outer space. How can it be talked about on a level of right and wrong? So not knowing is not a position we take to free ourselves from discernment. Sorry, I'm managing the weight room here. Okay, thank you. is not a position we take to avoid looking carefully at a situation. It's not a position. That's the blank consciousness kind of not knowing. So what does a practice of not knowing offer us in this situation? Well, there's space for more than our fear and reactivity. There's space for more than pessimism, and there's space to see possibility. There's possibility we can't see if the mind is crowded with certainty that this is an entirely disastrous situation and the country is going to hell. If I glom onto that view, then other possibilities, other views simply don't have room to arise. So not knowing rather than an escapism is a place of possibility. So another thing that comes up for me when I encounter or watch something like this spectacle of last night is some part of me really wants to give myself to the practice 100%. And I have some of that karma. And sometimes it feels like the most generous and honest response to the world. And it rises up in times of stress and fear for me. And now I see it less as I need to do that. I need to become a full-time renunciant yogi, and more as an emblem of a deep truth. That I feel this samsaric display, the spectacle of 2020, highlights the need for a real refuge. And something resonates in me that spiritual practice is the ultimate solace. That in a sense, it's something that can be never taken away from you, and so it's of deepest value. Now, I wonder if I would be able to be somebody in situations like some of the Tibetans who, in the midst of the Chinese barbarism, really maintained their deep faith and were able to practice deeply in the midst of that. Is that something that only the most gifted practitioners can touch, or can we all touch that if we really have the faith to turn towards it when things get difficult? So the impulse of full-on practice for me can be saying this practice won't fail you, or that all of these difficulties have the potential to really fertilize awakening. And perhaps when I'm most honest, what it's saying to me is get down to it while you still can. Get down to it while you still can. Who I can and will be when things unravel, whether that's my personal life, my body, my culture, the inevitable exigencies of life. Who I can and will be is dependent on how I've lived, the practice I'm doing now and have done. And of course, that's supported by others, but who I will be is being co-created by my actions day after day in the present moment. And these actions are co-created by previous versions of myself. So there's, I believe, something that we touch in the practice that we don't even have to necessarily know that we touch it. We don't have to know that we know it, and yet it still serves us. And this aspect of practice offers so much more than coping. We open up a perspective or a vantage point that experiences suffering very differently. In a sense, it's something that almost shouldn't be spoken about, and yet needs to be spoken. For centuries, ancestral teachers have been teaching that there is there is a going beyond suffering. There is an element of being that does not enter into samsara, that is not ever caught. I wrote a poem. And of course, my experience of this is very, very limited. Limited by my safety and privilege and level of experience. But nonetheless, the experience is something I have deep faith in. I make an offering of myself to the sky. Egoism undone in the openness of meditation. Smiling in direct experience, not limited to a body, a mind, a dream, a desire. I relax back into the shine of presence. Call it the sunlight of undefinable love. I thrive on the washing away of encrusting beliefs of how I and this moment should be, an alchemy sneaking a peek at the mercurial play, an alchemy sneaking a peek at the mercurial play of perfection with no opposite. To my binary mind, this truth is offensive, absurd, and definitely hidden. I gratefully take sick leave from dualistic certainties, and then I really breathe, relaxing back into the compassionate shine of nowness. So after the debate, my girlfriend and I are sitting there together and are shaken up, are holding our disturbance. And the first thing I notice is I feel and I see how our fear has disconnected us. And there's some sense that we've shrunk into self-concern. And for me, one of the things that makes life worth living, that authenticates the whole mess, is the flow of love. Giving love, receiving love, working on my limitations to giving love, working on the limitations of my receiving it. And so seeing how easily lack of awareness and identity with contracted states of mind leads to disconnect, I appreciated my luck in being able to see how that happens. Through our training, we can see how that happens, and we can appreciate, sometimes just in hindsight, how the impulse to come back to presence is habituated. So I recognize it's connection and it's love that keeps me from despair. It's connection and love that keeps me from being a smaller version of myself. So I found myself telling my partner what I really needed to hear. Was that first of all, there's so many good people we are connected with. There's so much care. There's so much sanity. There's so much practice happening. And because those are our values and our practice, we have those connections. And there's no reason to believe that they will vanish. And that because of those connections and because of so much sanity and care, we will be okay. Materially, maybe not. I don't know. Emotionally, could be rocky. But spiritually, yes, we will be okay. We will be okay as long as we keep a bead on this truth. And maybe we will be better than okay. So whatever happens in our life, the intentions and states of heart and mind we have most nurtured come forth. Whatever intentions and state of mind we have most nurtured will come forth, imperfect as they may be. And we will have support and resonance from those who are like-minded if we look for it. Support and resonance in staying larger than our fear, and staying rooted in the principles of Dharma, and inclining towards whatever the word love means for you.